Welcome once again to the J Lowe Artist YouTube channel. Thanks for joining me on this artistic adventure. Today we'll be working with ink, pen and ink. So have your kneaded eraser, a number 2 or an HB pencil handy, and any type of ink that you would like to use. But make sure that it's archival, that it's permanent, that it's black, and a smooth ink. And let's start doing some ink drawing.
So we're going to be using our number 2 pencil. We've got our Pigma Micron standing by. And we're going to start out here with Henry Clavell and our Superman. So we want to use the entire page. His head isn't quite in the middle of the page. But you want to go up and just make a little mark and say, this is kind of where I want his head to be. Kind of towards the top. You don't have to, you can have an inch or so from the top. But you want it fairly large. And then you make an oval about the size you think it needs to be. And of course his head isn't quite that oval, but that's okay. That's just marking where it kind of needs to be. If you want to do the neck, you could do just a kind of a couple of lines coming down. And then his shoulders, we're just going to block those in just as quick as anything. Now, when you're doing superheroes, the head is usually just slightly smaller because it makes the body more heroic. I don't know if you've ever noticed this in your favorite cartoons. Now, if you take the head and you measure the head and you come down from the shoulders, that's about where his pectoralis major goes. Your chest muscles. And so you're about the same size coming down there. And then if you measure that, that goes to your belly button. So you go from 1 head, 2 heads, 3 heads, there's your belly button. Which is, if you count down your 6-pack, it's at the bottom of the 6-pack. So it's okay if he's a little bit bigger than he normally is. That's superheroes, right? Now, if you measure the size of his head and you go from his shoulder to his elbow, you can mark that size of the head, shoulder to the elbow, and then from the elbow to the wrist, same size. Okay, we're measuring everything by the head. This is called proportioning. And that's a little simplistic, but I think you get the idea. Wrist, and then the hand. And the hand, when you throw in the hand, just look at the shape of the hand and throw that in. You don't need to do thumbs, you don't need to do fingers, just look at the shape that the hand is in. And it's this kind of little teardroppy shape with another little teardroppy thing in the middle. Upside down teardroppy. I got kind of carried away with the size of his body, so I'm going to make his head just a little bit bigger. A little line to show where the middle of the body goes. And just any kind of guide, anything that you think is going to help you. So little guides like where his muscles go, if you want. Do you ever wonder who designs all these costumes? If that is something that is fun to you, there's a job out there for you. Okay, what is most important here? Yeah. So we're going to spend a little extra time on the face, get the face right, then everything else will just fall into place. And if you wanted to, you can do the cape in there. But let's spend a little extra time in the face. So I'm going to zoom into his face. Okay, so what we need to do now is just figure out where everything goes. We're looking up into the face just a little bit, and so our proportions are going to feel just a little off. So what we're going to do is, if this is the space that you've allocated for the head, the eyes are just about right in the middle. And so if you kind of look down and you just say, okay, the eyes are going to be about right in here. And if you divide that space in half, I know we've gone over this before, but for the bottom of the nose, don't try to draw the nose in, just do a little shadow there. That little shadow just represents where the bottom of the nose goes. You can do a little line for the mouth if you want to, but the bottom of the mouth, you see that little shadow underneath the bottom lip? You can throw that in. And then I'm looking at it thinking, well, my chin needs to go a little bit bigger. So really that's all I've done is just block it in. There's no detail, nothing there. Just want to block it in. Because we're looking up into him, his jawline is going to be a little bit lower than normal. His ears are also going to appear a little lower because we're looking up into it. So if you go from the bottom of the eye out and just kind of curve it down, that's about where the ear is going to go. Even with about the mouth, if you go out from the mouth. So all I've done is block that in. Keep it nice and light. Remember, everything that we draw, it gets erased with our pencil. If you want to block in the hair, you're more than welcome to. But just remember, as we draw it, it's a little different as we draw it. And also, if you think about this, everything is going to slightly curve. Because we're looking up into the head, his eyes are going to curve just a little bit this way and a little bit this way. So there's a curve here. His nose is going to curve. His mouth curves. Just a little bit. One thing we don't want to have to deal with is the bridge of his nose. And because his eyes are very dark, reset in there, I think we're not even going to deal too much with the eyes. We're going to just use the shadows underneath to delineate the eyes. So what I'm going to do is just very briefly, I'm just going to kind of go over the section of his eye and look at the shadow that's under his eyebrow. It's kind of this little curved teardrop shape. I'm going to do that with hatched lines. So I'm just going to go in, hatch, 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 hatch. Just a curved line like that. And the other one's kind of the same way, except it's not quite as pronounced teardrop-y shape. The pupil of his eye, or the iris part of his eye, there's a little shine under there, and then his eye is very dark. So I'm just going to do a little bracket, one right there, one right there. And then his eyelid, in the corner of his eye, a couple little dots and dashes. And then I'm going to shade through his eye with dots and dashes, but leave a little shine right under the eye. And then little dots and dashes, and that's it. I mean, for his eye, a couple little lines, little dots and dashes. If you wanted to put his eyebrow in at this time, use those little feathered lines. So I'm just going to feather line out here, just a couple. Here's a couple more towards the inside of the nose. And where he's kind of intense, his eyebrows are kind of furrowed. Don't draw lines, do dots. So I'm just going to do little dashes and dots. There's 3 little lines there, and there's probably 2 or 3 right there. Little dots and dashes. Here's one towards the middle of the nose, just a little dot. On the other side. If you were to draw lines, those would look like big creases. Now look at the shape of his nose. If you think of it like a bat, it's almost like a bat shape. I'm going to do that with my little cross-hatching things. Little dots and dashes. Couple little dashes or little dots, whatever you feel like you need. And don't worry about the bridge of his nose. If you think to yourself, oh, I need that little shadow in there, couple little lines, dots and dashes, but don't draw a line down there. Okay, that's the big mistake that a lot of people make. Don't draw a line. So I'm just going to put 2 little lines right there. 2 little dots or dashes. And call it good. That's his nose. Maybe a dot over there. But if you feel like you need more edge, use dots or dashes or something like that. But don't draw lines around things. Just dots and dashes. The other eye is pretty much the same way. Just going to curve it out. Put a little bracket right there, one right there. Hatch through it. Couple little dots and dashes. Under his eye is a little shadow too, just little dots and dashes. And technically that's it. I guess we could put a couple little dots and dashes right there where the shadow of his nose is. That's really it. Lips are another thing. People like to draw lines around the lips. Watch how easy this is. Look at the corners of the mouth. The corners of the mouth are darker. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the corner of the mouth. I'm going to make this little triangle shape with dots and dashes. And as it comes over and up, you could make a little dot, a little dash, and then the other corner of the mouth is dark. Little corner of the mouth there. A little shadow underneath. So all you need is that bottom lip, just a couple little dots and dashes on that corner, a couple little dots and dashes on this corner. And then underneath it, you can do little lines like that, little dots and dashes. And if you think to yourself, oh, well, that lip needs to go a little darker, I need some darkness in that lip, use dots. Don't use lines around it. 1 or 2 little dots will make a huge difference. Just a couple little dots. His face is almost done. I'm going to finish this other eyebrow. Now, he's got some like dimples on either side. Again, just use little dashed lines. Kind of look up there, and if you wanted to draw them first with your pencil because you're not sure if they're in the right place, you could. I'm just going to do these little hatched lines and a couple of dots. Same thing over here, little hatched lines and a couple of dots. And where his chin goes, all this shape under the chin, don't draw a line there either. Look at the shape of the shadow under his neck and draw that in with hatched lines. So I'm just going to go in and hatch line, hatch, 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 hatch. Now, if we want to change this, we can change this anytime we want to. If we drew a line, you're stuck with it. Up this side of his cheek is very light, and his nose is very light, or his ear. Just leave it out. Here's his hair. Defines his face over there and the top of his ear. The bottom of his ear, you can just put a couple little dashes and dots and then leave it out. So if I were to get rid of all that graphite over there, I mean, that's really all there is to it. Is that the easiest face you've ever drawn? I might need a little dot right below his eye, just right there, just to show where that goes, just enough. Now, as far as hair goes, remember the hair comes out of the head. So you can just do these little hatched lines coming out. And if you want to, again, you can draw a little line to tell you where the hair starts, but you just kind of come out away from it like this, in the direction the hair flows. And if it's really dark, like right here down his sideburns, you just go closer. You go over that a couple of times. Here's his cheekbone. I'm just going to put that in with these little hatched lines there too. The top of his ear is defined by his hair. So I'm just going to keep his hair going and then stop where the top of his ear is. And where his hair comes out of his head up here, just do these little curved lines. You can go towards the head or away from the head, or both. In the direction the hair flows. Don't draw a line there. It'll look silly. It'll look like a toupee. And if you're not sure, try dots and dashes first. When you're ready to do the ear, just do the shapes of the shadows with these little hatch lines. So I'm not going to draw a line around the ear. I'm just going to do this little shadow in the ear. I'm just looking at the shape of the shadow with little hatched lines. Here's another one inside the ear. And you can use little dots and dashes too if you want. Whatever you think is going to work the best. The ear lobe, bottom of the ear, couple little lines, and you got it. Is that the easiest ear you've ever drawn? You can always add more little dots and dashes if you need them. Here's the rest of his hair, and his hair defines his neck right there. So I'm going to let that define his neck. And really, you can do whatever you want to inside the hair. I mean, I could do little circles like this. Nobody will ever care. When you get to the edge, do your little feathered lines. So it looks more like hair. The rest of it, you just scribble through, just like we did with our dog. Didn't we draw a dog? Yeah, the puppy. Just scribble, scribble, scribble. It's the edges that make the difference. He's got this distinctive little flip of his hair. I'm going to put that in with some line and then scribble through that because it's dark. But don't be afraid to leave little areas out. We can come back into that hair later if we want and refine it a little bit. That shadow under his neck is a little darker, and so I'm going to crosshatch through that. And you can go through it as many times as you feel like you need to make it as dark as you feel like it needs to go. So little dots and dashes, any of the shadows, that's all you get, little dots and dashes. And you got it. And you can put in as much of that as you need. What makes it is your edges are nice and soft. If we drew a line there, they wouldn't be soft. Anywhere else you feel like you need to go, he's got some little edges across his eyebrows. I'm just gonna throw a few of those little dots and dashes in. That makes his eyebrows kind of stand out a little bit. There goes the graphite, and the head is done. The rest of it's going to be a piece of cake till we get down to the hands. So let's do that. Any dark areas that you see that you think, oh, I got to put that in there, go ahead and put it in with little dots and dashes. But if it's light, if there's a light edge, leave it out. You can always come back in later and add stuff to it. There's his cape. The edge of his cape is very light. I'm going to leave it out for now. Like I say, I can always come back in later and put it in. If you want to put the S in, notice on the very bottom of the S, there is a little darker edge. It makes it look like it stands out away from the rest of it. So on the top edge, you may want to just leave it out, and on the bottom edge, you can put in that little edge, whatever that little edge is. So it's almost a subliminal thing where you're going, yeah, I kind of see where that's going. But just go ahead and leave it out. If you wanted to, if you're a little uncomfortable doing it just freehand like this, take your pencil in there. You could draw it in and then finish it out. And a couple little dots and dashes, and you got it. You can see where the S is, even though I haven't drawn it in. And if you want to, couple little dots and dashes, and you got it. I'm just using hatched lines to show the shadows. You don't want to draw heavy lines in there. But you can hatch through it as much as you need to. Anytime you're doing folds, like the folds of his cape, just pick out the little shapes of the darkest shapes of the folds, put those in, and then leave the rest out. You can always come back in later. So just little dots and dashes, and you got it. You can crosshatch through it. You can, whatever it takes, whatever you feel like it needs. If we had more time, you might want to do the texture of his suit, but that's up to you. Look at the shape of the shadows. Draw those in. Don't think of it as a person, even though he's an alien. Guys, ready to do the hand yet? Okay. I know you're not ready, but let's do it. And this is going to be so easy. First of all, don't think of fingers. Don't think of anything. Draw the shapes in between. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in. My hand is in the wrong place, so I've got to raise it up a little bit. I'm just going to go in and look at the shape in between his thumb and his forefinger. I'm going to draw that in. And then his thumb, on the tip of his thumb, I'm just going to do this little arch. There's the tip of his thumb. Here's a thumbnail. Just going to do a little dot or a dash there. Couple little dashes. There's his thumb. Let me zoom into that so you can see what I'm doing. Maybe some little dots and dashes around it, but that's it. That's his thumb. Piece of cake. We can come back into it later. I mean, I'm going to come back into it and do some little darker edges there. But I didn't really draw the thumb. And just like we did his little dimples and things, we can come back into it and do a couple little divots where the veins pop out, and that's it. As far as his knuckles go, you just come straight over from where you think the knuckles kind of go. You just do a couple little dashes. There's a knuckle. Here's a knuckle, another knuckle. And the edge, don't worry about the edge. If you have to, put a couple little dots or dashes there just to show the edge. That's it. The other fingers, as you come in, you say, well, there's a little wrinkle. If I go straight across from his thumbnail right there, there's a little wrinkle there. There's a dot and dash. There's another one over here, another little wrinkle. And the tip of his finger. And that's it. You could probably, and I can't see there, but you could probably see some of his finger in there too from the backside. You can put that in there. A couple little dots and dashes. And you got it. Wahoo, that's his hand. You don't need to worry about every little finger. We can always come back into that and add more. But for right now, let's just leave that out. Here's his other arm. Again, I'm just doing the shadows I see. Don't worry about everything. Don't be afraid of subliminal line. That's where you break that edge. If it's nice and light, just break it. Even if you don't think you should, try it. Because you can come back into it later and even add more if you want to. When you're doing abdominal muscles, just do the little shapes of the shadows in between them. Don't try to do little lines around or anything. Just the little shapes of those. Wish we had time to do bones and muscles. Because if you like drawing people, knowing bones and muscles is essential. If you're going to get into fashion design, clothing design or anything like that, I would suggest that. When you're ready for the next hand, just do the same thing. Start out with all the shadows that you see. Don't try to connect them all. Usually you can't see all the fingers of the hand anyway. Almost ready to get rid of all the graphite. I have no idea what's going on with the little stripes, so I just drew some little shapes in between the stripes, and hopefully it turns out. If you want one side to be a little darker than the other, just hatch through it. Like on this S, this part of the S is a little darker. I'm just going to hatch through it. And look at the shapes of your darkness and just hatch through them until they're as dark as you need them to be. Here's the cape. Last but not least, you want your signature there, and a good place for the signature is right down by his hand down there. So there's tons more that we could do on this, but we've worked on it for an hour. That's our practice time. You can go through and do as much as you feel like you need to. Hope you've enjoyed today as much as I have. I really enjoy this. And I hope that sometime during your experience here, you've found that art makes your life a little bit better. It really does. It's very relaxing, very enjoyable to draw. It's good. It's good for your hand-eye coordination. It's good for your mind. It's good for your psyche. I hope you have a lovely day.